Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad that you've decided to join me if you're watching us live tonight on the YouTube stream. Always remember every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock, unless we have something going on like last week, we are going to be live for your new episode of New England Sports Weekly. Always remember to follow us on YouTube for the live streams at New England Sports Weekly. Well, folks, it's been a busy one since we last left you off. There's been so much to get to in the world of New England sports. And of course, a lot of things going on out as we get close to the holidays. We're only, today's the 15th, so we're 10 days away from Christmas. So a week from this Saturday. So, man, this has really flown by. This whole year has flown by, especially if we're looking at sports. The football season has flown by. Baseball, everything flew right by. But especially this year with football, I thought maybe depending on how things worked out with Mac and the rest of this team, it might kind of be a little bit of a slow start, slower drag as we got through the season, a little bit of a slog. But no, it's been exciting as you all know where the Patriots sit 9-4 as they come off the bye. Man, it's good to be a New England sports fan and good to be a Pats fan. Man, I am jacked up for this show tonight. I'm so excited. We'll get right into the out of the box segment. As I mentioned, it is a loaded show with missing a week here. But as I mentioned, the Patriots beat the Bills 14-10 in their week 12 game before the bye week. And they just absolutely took the Bills' souls. Now, the final score, you say 14-10. Oh, yeah, that's nothing. Or I should say 14-11. But it really, if you look at it, the way the Patriots played, we'll get into this more here, but they ran the ball 46 times, only threw it 3 times. And the Bills knew it was coming. They still couldn't stop it. And the Patriots ripped the Bills' soul right out of them. I watched it happen. Now, they did a good job again this week against the Buccaneers. They came back and almost beat Tom Brady. But, hey, the Bills' other daddy came back and said, hey, remember me? I was in the AFC East for 20 years. You might know my name, Tom Brady. I'm still here, and I'm still good. Reigning Super Bowl champ, and I'll take your lunch money too. So the Bills, even though they got their souls taken from them from their original oppressor, the Patriots, Brady did help them out here. So the Bills aren't dead yet, but man, they're on life support as far as trying to get to that division title. The wild card spot's a little bit different for the Bills, but anyways, the Patriots did a number on the Bills as far as a mental mind fuck on that one, to be honest. So that was interesting, to say the least, for that victory against the Buffalo Bills. The Patriots moved on to the bye week. Nothing really eventful other than coming off the bye yesterday. There was a report that Mac Jones was not on the injury report. Then about an hour later, they released another one stating that Mac Jones was a limited participant at practice with a thumb on his left hand. Now, remember, he's a righty, so not really a big deal. And then they released, no, he was a full participant in practice, but did have an injury to the thumb on his left hand, his non-throwing hand. So there's a little bit of controversy there, but nothing really boiled over. Nothing became of it. So nothing to really worry about there with Mac. They got Kyle Duggar back, who missed the Buffalo game because he did test positive for COVID, but he was asymptomatic, but because all the protocols, which we'll get into a little bit later, because there's been a huge outbreak in the NFL this week, especially in Cleveland. So that's going to be interesting and some in around the league as well. So it's just been there are 75 to now confirmed 90 cases. So it's just been going crazy here in the NFL over this last week. But things have all been quiet on the Western Front, so to say, for the Patriots as far as the bye week is concerned, as they get ready to travel to Indianapolis on Saturday, as they will take on the Indianapolis Colts, who are 7-6 and look to strengthen their wild card spot, but the Patriots have other plans. We'll get into that a little bit more here later on in the show. And speaking of COVID outbreaks, as we just did with the Browns and in the NFL, it hit home here in Boston, anyways, or at least in the New England sports region, with Brad Marchand and now Patrice Bergeron, who just got added today. So it has been crazy. It's been absolutely ridiculous. It's just when you thought things have kind of quieted down here with COVID, not that they quieted down. I know we've all been kind of watching and seeing what's happening around the world. And not that I'm trying to make this any political. I'm not trying to do anything with that. I'm just getting into with how this is affecting sports. That's all I'm talking about, folks. So don't go turning off the podcast. Don't go doing anything like that. I'm not getting into political bullshit. I'm not doing that. I'm just talking about how this has been affecting sports, and it's hit the Bruins locker room hard, as now Bergeron and Marchand are on the COVID list. So that will be a big blow, because there goes 2/3 of that top line. Now it's just David Pastrnak, and it's showing here, as last night they lost 4-1, and it was not good at all. They just got pummeled, and they lost that game in the first period. So it was not a fun night of hockey, and it appears that it's not going to be a few fun weeks here of hockey until they get Bergeron and Marchand back and get one of the best lines in hockey, if not the best, back up and running. And as we talked about earlier, the Boston Celtics and Jason Tatum have been up and down, and mostly down lately, as they came off a 1-4 road trip on the West Coast. So it was not a successful West Coast hike for your Boston Celtics, as they try to get back into relevancy here. Is not that they're out of a playoff spot or anything this early on in the season, but it just has been anything but a smooth ride. And as we'll get to later on in the show, there were some interesting comments that were made by Ime Udoka about Jason Tatum and whether he should stop playing with some, or not stop playing, but maybe kind of stop some of the admiring and oogling and ogling with some of his friends and cohorts that he has in the league, especially like the LeBron Jameses, the Kevin Durant's, the Beals, the Westbrooks, you name them here, the Devin Bookers, all of the young guys, all the old veterans out there that have finally accepted him into the superstar club. There's been a little bit of that. All right, you got a nut up or shut up time here from Tatum talk that he got from Udoka. So it'll be interesting to see how things unfold here over the next couple of weeks, as Tatum did come out and have a good response against the Bucks. But we'll see how things go the rest of the season, if maybe Tatum finally wakes up and see if that lit a fire under him. Like we mentioned, there's a lot to get to here, so we'll just jump right into it here with the New England Patriots. As we mentioned off the top of the show, New England took a big-time victory from the Buffalo Bills as they beat Buffalo 14-10 on Monday Night Football 2 weeks ago, before the Patriots were on the bye. And like I mentioned, that was just a soul-snatching win. Now, say that one about 5 times faster for kids. But that, like I said, it just ripped the soul out of the Buffalo Bills. You could just see it. The Patriots ran the ball 46 times, only threw it 3 times. And you could see why watching the game. Mac Jones threw one pass in, I believe it was the first quarter or maybe early second, up to Jonnu Smith, who's been a disappointment. But he did make one of the best catches you've seen all year, after the wind kind of blew that one a little high, and Smith had to leap up and kind of twist himself around and finally pulled the ball down. So it was a pretty amazing catch. If you just go out and look at it on YouTube or somewhere out on the social media, you'll find it. But that was the best pass that he had all night out of the 3. Other than that, it just was nothing special at all. And yet, running 48 times, Buffalo just could not stop it. Yeah, I know that it's not like the Patriots turned it into 3 touchdowns on the ground, but still, New England was consistently driving downfield, getting into field goal range, getting chunk plays on the ground without even throwing the ball. So that's the part that really was, if you're the Bills, demoralizing for them. And yes, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde, you clowns. Yes, it was. That was a legitimate question that you got asked after the game if it was embarrassing. Yes, if I was on that Bills defense, hell yeah, I would be embarrassed by what the Patriots did. They took the ball on 46 carries on the ground, and it was the Patriots. Yes, they do run some zone stretch plays. They do try to get it on the outside occasionally, but their bread and butter running the game is using that fullback and running it right up the gut, right through that A gap, the B gap. They're really not going on having a lot of outside zones or stretches that they use. And if they do, I mean, this game you saw more of them because it was 48 run plays, so you can't just every single time run the ball up the gut. But you know what I mean. The Patriots are mainly they attack you right up the middle. They're not really fancy with their run plays. Try to hide a lot of it on the most of the time. As far as this year, they're a physical football team when they come to run the ball, and that's exactly what happened this time around. So that's what has to be embarrassing and demoralizing if you're Buffalo is just you got absolutely gutted on the ground for over 220 yards of offense between Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevens. And both of them had really good games. Harris had I believe it was over 115 yards on the ground, and he did end up leaving with not a quad injury, but a calf injury. There we go, focus. So he left the game with a calf injury, and you could visibly see it. So it'll be interesting to see if he's ready to go against the Colts. But luckily, they have a stud young rookie running back in Ramondre Stevens, who everybody kind of was doubting or thought he just might be that third, maybe fourth guy, depending on how things shook out. But he really has shown a lot this year, and he came in on 24 carries and got over 78 yards. And I know you might look at it, oh, it's 24 carries, 78 yards. But if you on some of those, they were some short yardage carries that they just needed a couple yards, or they were kind of in the red zone where things shrunk. And then there were a couple plays that were where the Bills just late in the game, they finally maybe in a few plays wised up to what was happening, got in the backfield. But a lot of Stevenson's plays were some chunk plays, 5 yards, 8 yards, 10, 15. He had a couple 20-plussers in there, but he was chunking them up for most of the night. And the same for Damian Harris. So both of those backs were able to, on the 46 carries, they were just absolutely gutting the Buffalo Bills on the ground. So it's not that. So when you hear somebody in a 14-10 victory that they took their soul, that's what I'm saying. The Bills knew what was coming, but yet the Patriots were able to execute it perfectly. Although obviously, like I said, you were maybe not perfectly, but damn near perfect. You just wish they would have got another touchdown or two to kind of salt this one away. But and then on defense, they were able to get to Josh Allen for the most part. He had some success in those last couple drives. There were a couple of penalties that, especially that one where I can't remember who the defensive back was that went to go push Josh Allen out of bounds, but they pushed Allen out of bounds, basically just two-hand touched him. He was still his momentum was carrying him out of bounds, but for the most part, his body was still in bounds, plenty of opportunity it was plenty legal, I should say, for the Patriots to not maybe wallop him, but just like they did, two-hand touch him and push him out. And they nailed the Patriots with a personal foul penalty, which was total BS. That should not have been called a personal foul, or not a personal foul, but a roughing penalty, because that unnecessary roughness, because that was ridiculous. It was two-hand touch. He was still in bounds. You pushed him out. And they did get points out of that drive. I believe that was the one where they ended up getting the touchdown on that drive. And then a stupid N'Keal Harry penalty earlier in the game, earlier in the first half, where God knows why he was back receiving punts. That I don't know why, and I never want to see it again. That was absolutely ridiculously stupid on their part to put him back. I love Belichick, but man, that one came back to bite him in the ass because he should not have even had N'Keal Harry anywhere back. He had N'Keal Harry back as the deep man, and then you had Gunnar Olszewski as the shallow punt returner. Now, on a night where you had 60 plus mile an hour wind gusts, where the ball, if you weren't going into the wind, if you didn't have the wind at your back and you were going into the wind, then I mean that if you were punting with the wind at your back, that ball was going to fly so far back, and that's exactly what happened. In N'Keal Harry muffed the punt, and then you can definitely see the inexperience. He tries to duck out of the way, but the ball had already bounced back up, just scrapes his face shield, and you can see enough of it where it changes direction. And the Bills pick it up, and they ended up getting a field. That's the one where they get the touchdown. Now that this is 2 weeks old, folks. Here, just give me a break. But he ended up getting that's the one where they got the touchdown because they were within 10 yards. So they got the touchdown, and then on that awful unnecessary roughness penalty, that they got the field goal out of that. But other than two penalties, the Patriots defense, yes, you can argue that there was a little wind, or not a little wind, there was a lot of wind. You can argue that the wind helped the Patriots defense out, but still they held Josh Allen, who has an absolute cannon, who was making throws in parts of the game. They still held the Bills to 10 points on the night. And like I said, if it wasn't for a bonehead penalty by N'Keal Harry, the Patriots would have been the final score would have been 14-3 at that point. So really it was Patriots defense played really well, and they played, and I know again the conditions helped the Patriots out immensely, but let's not split hairs here. The Patriots defense all season long has been absolutely devastatingly good. Are we talking historic defense? No, I mean, not to this point. I mean, they're giving up 14.5 points this year, so they're really good. I mean, sorry, 15.5. So this defense is playing really well. And I don't want to hear, well, they played Tennessee without half their team. They played the Cleveland Browns without Nick Chubb. They played Buffalo in this bad weather. Yes, I know these situations happen, but guess what? You have to play what's on the schedule. And Tennessee still put up over 200 yards rushing on the ground. And they didn't have their two top receivers, which that's going to hamstring you any day. And that's the one where once you get into the playoffs, if they get those two receivers back, yes, the things will be different. But still, Tannehill has turned himself into a pretty good quarterback. And then you look at the Cleveland Brown game, they still had they still had Landry, they still had their tight ends. And yes, you didn't have Hunt or Chubb in that game, but you still had everything else on that Browns offense. So it's not like this isn't like 2019, because I've heard some people, not all the people, but there's been a minority that have kind of compared this to 2019, where the Patriots defense got inflated in 2019. But to me, there's a couple different things. 2019, you played awful quarterbacks. You played not Nick Folk, but I can't remember his first name, but Folk was his name as the starting quarterback, or Falk. Sorry, Falk was the quarterback for the Jets. You just had a bunch of scrubs and scrabinis that shouldn't have been anywhere. You had Ryan Fitzpatrick was probably one of the better ones in that first 8 games. It just seemed like everybody the Patriots had played that year, their quarterbacks were hurt, injured, on the IR for the year. Something happened. They sick. Things happened. And then finally, once you play Baltimore, when that was the year that Lamar Jackson won the MVP in 2019, that it just ended up being they crushed them. But honestly, this year's it is totally different because to me, even in the first 4 to 5 games of the year, for 6 games of the year, where you face they went 2-4 in that stretch and things weren't looking great. You still had to face Tom Brady. You only gave up 19 points to Tom Brady in that loaded Bucs offense, the greatest quarterback of all time, who we know what he's very capable of, and we know what that offense is capable of with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. Antonio Brown wasn't there that day, and Gronk wasn't because of injury, and then Brown because he had COVID that day. But still, that I mean, you lose those weapons, you still have a million weapons in that offense. Still had Cameron Brate, OJ Howard, Scotty Miller. So you just had a whole host of weapons there. And like I said, you had Evans and Godwin, who are number ones on anybody else's team. So you have a loaded Bucs offense. You held them to 19 points. The only game where you really didn't look great against an elite quarterback was Dallas. And they weren't horrible. They just weren't what they are now. You ended up, you really only gave up 28 points to Dallas because in regulation you gave up 21, and then the Dallas Cowboys ended up getting that pick 6, and then the Patriots came right back and got their touchdown thanks to Mac Jones and Kendrick Bourne. But anyways, that was the one game where they didn't look great. Well, I shouldn't say the one game. That was along with New Orleans and Dallas. That's really where the defense really has struggled. But other than that, like, you came out, you played really well against Justin Herbert. You came out, played well against the Browns, played well against the Titans, played well against the Bills. I mean, you've really since the Dallas game, everything has really tightened down. And in that 2019 season, the first half of the season, otherworldly great. I mean, the statistics were on historic rates to be maybe the best defense of all time. And then after Baltimore, everything just fell apart on that defense. And I think there you had some older veterans. You didn't have a lot of young stud pieces that were on that defense. Now you brought in you paid for Matthew Judon, and then you drafted Christian Barmore, who has been an absolute steal with the 38th overall pick. That guy is playing like a first rounder. Last year you drafted Kyle Duggar. He's a cornerstone. So you have Barmore, who's a cornerstone. You have Duggar, who's a cornerstone now on that defense. And then you have Josh Uche, who he's been hurt. He's been out on the short-term IR, so you haven't seen as much of him this year. But he's the guy that's got good pass rush abilities, good outside linebacker. Can you move him around in places? So you have a good young piece there. And then J.C. Jackson. I know J.C. Jackson was there in 2019. But he's still young, and you put him with the rest of this core. So there you go. Now you're talking. Now you have good pieces, and that's where you can start to mix in the veterans, mix in free agency, mix in some rotational guys. That's where you can supplement with those free agents in that case when you have those young building blocks. And then obviously, I know Matthew Judon's different, but he's still I'd call him a free agent building block. So really, things have really gone well for the Patriots as far as they've really revamped the defense. And this is a situation where you actually have young stud defensive players that they're getting better as the season's going along. This isn't the opposite where you had a veteran team where possibly things where you faced better competition, where maybe the tread was starting to fall off some of the tires. And I think in this situation, it's the opposite, where you had some younger guys, you faced some stiffer competition earlier with Brady and Dallas, and you had to get things set, and this was really the first kind of go around for this group, as far as with Barmore and Duggar and Uche and Jackson, and everybody kind of rolled into the one with onto the veterans. So it's kind of you had to gel, and you're doing it against better competition this year. So like I said, even in the early in the year, you played well against Brady. And then since the Dallas game, you really have rolled and you've played well against the rest of your competition. I mean, honestly, this defense has played better. I mean, surpassed my expectations, because I thought this could be a team where they might give up more points than they have. At this point, I thought maybe this is somewhere in the neighborhood of low 20s that you're giving up. So you're talking about a 15, 16, 17th, 18th ranked defense, somewhere in that category. But you're talking about a unit that's minimum top 10. They're in my opinion, they're definitely top 5, top 3 in the league. And you have, and I thought at the beginning of the year that's going to be based more on your secondary, have a good pass rush with Judon, maybe Winovich, and Hightower back in Van Noy. I thought, okay, yeah, this will be a good pass rush. Not a great pass rush, but really this year, what surprised me the most has been the pressure and the pass rushing ability that this team has had against the good competition. Especially, I think the biggest, well, obviously, what you don't really have to say is Matthew Judon. I mean, Matthew Judon has just been an absolute one-man wrecking crew. He's been a beast out there at the outside linebacker, defensive end, wherever Belichick wants to put him. He absolutely wrecks your game. That's how well he's been playing. And in my opinion, he's probably right in that top 3 for defensive players of the year. But then you throw in Christian Barmore, who I know he's not going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year because Micah Parsons is playing so well in Dallas, but Barmore has been an absolute find. He's been a stud in the middle of that defensive line. It just seems like every week he makes a play and puts pressure, if not gets a sack, or gets in the backfield, pushes 1 to 2 offensive linemen, and is able to wrap up the running back and disrupt the play. He's just been an absolute stud. So to me, really, this defense is for real. This defense is gonna take this team to where they need to go. I mean, they're really driving this train for the Patriots. Now, this does not say that Mac Jones or the offense is a passenger. I wholeheartedly disagree with that whole passenger thing with the offense, and especially Mac Jones. That's not what I'm saying. But in my standpoint here is that this Patriots defense is their bread and butter. It's their moneymaker. This is what the Patriots lean on to really win games. I mean, they're getting takeaways at a high rate. J.C. Jackson he calls himself Mr. INT. Well, he might have been self-anointed, but he sure is right, because he's taken away. He's second in the league, only behind not Stephon Diggs, but Trayvon Diggs, Stephon's brother. And he honestly is, to me, he's developed into a number 1 corner. I had serious questions if he could be an actual number 1, because he got absolutely lit up by Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch. I know you can say, man, maybe the Patriots were mailing it in December last year, blah, 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 whatever. Or there were a couple other games there later in the year where he got torched, and you're like, well, he's a good number. He's a really good number 2. He's a good complement to Stephon Gilmore when he's out there. But I mean, honestly, this year he's played well above my expectations as far as he's working his way into being a true shutdown corner, which to me, like I said, I didn't think he was worthy of a true number 1 shutdown label, but he's really, really, really making me pause and really making me think hard about that. And And I'm at that point where I'm ready to slap, maybe not shut down at this point, but slap a true number one corner onto him. And he's trending towards the shutdown. But I mean, he's really proved me wrong this year as far as thinking that he was nothing more than a very high end number two corner that you had to put a true number one in to complement him. And so this is a situation where the Patriots are going to have to pay him. But I mean, honestly, with the way that JC Jackson is playing, the way that Matthew Judon has created all this pressure, Kyle Duggar, and we mentioned Barmore, and then it'll be nice to see here over these last four games how Josh Uche mixes into this as we get towards the playoffs. This is going to be really fun with this defense, and this, like I said, they're just driving this train. And of course, the other part of this whole thing is with Mac, because I know after that whole situation in not such I mean, that sounds horrible when you call the situation, but after the Buffalo game, I mean, there were obviously you would be stupid if you criticized Mac Jones, in my opinion, for that game. I mean, what is he going to do? Are the Patriots going to be so dumb enough in these 60-mile-an-hour winds that we're kicking up at times to try to bomb the ball downfield? Yeah, don't get me wrong. There were some times where, well, I thought maybe you want to try a few quick slants, those 5-yard slants, maybe throw a screen a few times. I wish maybe they tried a few of those at times to keep the Bills off balance. But I mean, honestly, after you saw that pass to Jonnu Smith, were you really going to say, oh, let's throw the ball around the yard? No, I wasn't going to be in that situation. I was like, all right, I'm fine where they are running the ball. So I really wasn't upset that Mac didn't get a lot of play in this game, and really wasn't overly excited for them to go throw the ball all around the yard, because I mean, unless you have Aaron Rodgers' arm, Tom Brady's, yes, people in Tom's older age, he has a really good arm. He has a rocket arm. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen's arm, unless you have something like that, a veteran gunslinging type of arm where you can go out there, throw the ball really hard into the wind. I mean, even in that situation, I'm really kind of hesitant to throw the ball a lot in these situations. I probably, if I had a Rodgers, if I had an Allen, if I had a Mahomes, if I had a Brady, I mean, that's where I'd be like, all right, I'll pass it 15 times in this game, but I'm not, maybe close to 20. But if I have a good running game like the Patriots, I'm not going to go out there and try to throw it a lot. So that's where I wasn't upset, and that's where if you are criticizing Mac Jones, that's just so dumb. It's why are they going to bang their heads against the wall in a horrible weather situation, and just possibly throw it up for grabs if the wind catches it or knocks it down into a defender's hands? It's just, that would be so stupid. So I just don't get how some people were criticizing Mac. That was just so dumb, because I mean, I know some people wanted to see that as a test whether Mac Jones could pass this one on the road against in a hostile environment against Buffalo. But I mean, to me, he's honestly, every test you throw to him, he passes it every single day. He passes it every time. And I don't have a lot of qualms with him. There's nothing. I mean, yes, do I want to see him? Do I want to see him in the playoffs? Do I want to see him in a pressure situation, maybe down by 14 points, 10 points, see how he reacts, how he responds, if he's able to drive this team down? Yes, of course I want to see it, but am I doubting him? Am I a doubter? No, not anymore. I mean, I used to be at the beginning of the season, because you all know I wanted Justin Fields, and not going to go rehash that. But I mean, I fully converted, and I'm I'm a full Mac supporter. I love Mac, and I've seen the light. I've come to see who Mac is, and I think he is the future of this franchise. He is everything that you would want a Patriots quarterback as far as in a rookie. Now we'll see how, when he develops into maybe more of that game, that field general, gun with not maybe not howitzer, but maybe kind of what we saw with Brady. Obviously, nobody's ever going to duplicate Brady's success. That was utterly ridiculous. But I'm just talking about, you get into like where you can open the playbook up and you see more of that field general type of what you saw with him at Alabama with all those weapons. You kind of have an ultimate playbook with him. So, but right now for what you have, I love what Mac is, and I think they hit a grand slam. They didn't have to wait around long enough. And and on a side note, if you're the Buffalo Bills, you have to be just absolutely puking in your mouth thinking about that right now, because you took what, 20, 23, 25 years. No, I'm 30. When did Jim Kelly retire? 97, 98. So what, 20, 21, 22 years? It took them that long to find Josh Allen, and they weren't even sure when they drafted Josh Allen to find their replacement at quarterback. And you just look around the rest of the AFC East, let alone the rest of the league. I mean, Miami still isn't sure about Tua, so they're still trying to find the successor to Dan Marino. And I mean, the Jets have been trying to find Joe Namath's successor since 1971 or whatever it is, or somewhere in the 70s. So they've been searching for damn near 70 years, or not 70, but damn near 60 some odd years, whatever it is, that they've been looking for a long time, 60, 70 years for a stupid quarterback, and they still can't find it. So, I mean, the Patriots on their, like I said, if you're the Bills fans watching that game, you just have to be puking in your mouth, just out of pure hatred for the Patriots, because come on. I mean, you took how many cracks to get Josh Allen, and it took the Patriots 1 year off, and then they got Mac Jones. So, oh man, it's great to be a Patriots fan. Oh my God, it's so nice to see the rest of the AFC East kind of squirm again and just kind of look at that situation. Like, you have to be effing kidding me. We thought we had killed the Patriots, and they're back. And they're back. And now the rest of the NFL probably saying the same thing with the Patriots with the number 1 overall seed. Oh man. But yes, I think I've seen enough out of Mac where I feel comfortable with him going into the playoffs. So I really am not worried to the extent that this is my number 1 fear. Now, could he prove me wrong? He could. But like I said, I've converted to believing Mac is the guy and he can do it. And he's shown me along the way. Now, this may be a situation where they might not be put into a situation where they're down by 14 points with how good the defense is. Not saying it can't happen, but who knows? Maybe this week in Indy, maybe this is the week in Indy where he shows us he can come back from a 14-point deficit, 10-point deficit. But maybe not. Maybe this defense will just hold down Indy, but we'll see how it goes. And speaking of those Colts, the Indianapolis Colts, who at one time were the Patriots' rival. We'll get into that here in a little bit, but the Colts, who are 7-6, they are fighting for a wild card spot. I don't think they're going to catch the Titans just because they put so much room in between them early in the season before they lost Derrick Henry for the year, or it looks like it's going to be the year. Before they lost him, they put so much space between them. So unless the Titans absolutely fall on their face, it looks like Indy is going to have to fight for one of those 3 wild card spots. And they have both teams, the Patriots and the Colts, have their hands full with these 2 rushing attacks. And obviously, passing wise, the Patriots are the more, well, I'd say more improved because you have a rookie, but I mean, Carson Wentz he had his one really good year where he was going to win the MVP until he got injured back in 2017. And then he's really kind of had an up and down career. Now it's not. I know some people have painted it worse than it has been, but I wouldn't say it's been perfect from any standpoint. I still think Philly messed up by trading him away. Now, did Carson really do himself any favors his last couple of years there in Philly? No, but I think Indy, it'll be seen if they did give up too much for Carson or maybe not enough, and see if he really does turn into their long-term solution. Because I mean, he's still relatively young, so they could still build around him for a long time. But Carson Wentz, to me, I like Carson Wentz. I'm somewhere in the middle on Carson because I'm not completely down on him like some people are, but I I'm not buying fully 100% into Carson Wentz either, because to me there's just something missing when it comes to Carson Wentz. And I know this year is different for him because he's got on 22 passing touchdowns and only 5 picks, so he's playing really well. But to me, Carson Wentz needs that kind of comp. He's one of those quarterbacks that he can definitely at times win you games. He's got the arm, he's got the talent to do so. But for the most part, he's one of those guys. And I'm not going to pull a Chris Sims here, folks. Don't worry. I'm not going to pull out that. He can win you games, but he can also lose you, because that was retarded. But I mean, or dumb. My sorry, folks. I'll take that back. I will take back the R word. I'm sorry that I should not have used that. But anyways, that was I mean, that to me, that's just it's dumb. Just thinking about that. Um, I mean, with Carson Wentz, I mean, to me, he it's just he's an enigma for me to kind of to figure out here. I mean, he's a good quarterback, but to me, he needs that complement around him. He needs that running game, which he has there with Jonathan Taylor. So it's going to be a difficult matchup here for the Patriots. But I think this is where, if you're the New England Patriots, if you can bottle up Jonathan Taylor, which is going to be hard. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's absolute. If there wasn't going to be a quarterback winning the MVP, which I think Brady's going to win it, but if it was, if it was somebody like a Derrick Henry or Jonathan Taylor, I think this would be the year. I mean, I'm sorry, if there was going to be a guy to do it, it would be Jonathan Taylor. So from that standpoint, it's if you can bottle up Jonathan Taylor, you can force the ball into Carson Wentz's hands, and you can really make this a one-dimensional game. I think the Patriots have a pretty good opportunity to win this game, just because I just don't believe in Carson Wentz. And I believe in him if you have that running game with him as a complement. But if you try to, at this point in his career, I don't think we're seeing the 2017 one Carson Wentz this year. But I think this is where, if you put the ball into his hands with the Patriots secondary that they have, J.C. Jackson, Kyle Duggar is going to be back this week. I really like the Patriots' chances from that standpoint. And this is where I think the Patriots are going to be able to eke out one of those 28-24 victories, or even 28-21 victories against the Indianapolis Colts. But it's so funny this week watching the Colts react, because I mean, for the most part they've been pretty good, but there've been a few situations where the Okereke, the linebacker for the Colts, did bring up the Patriots game plan. I was like, oh, well, we basically said the game plan, we're going to try to make the Patriots one-dimensional. We'll just have Mac throw the ball. Be careful what you wish for, because I don't think Mac is like this scared little puppy that's just going to wilt when the lights get bright. This is a guy that's going to be able to go out there, sling the ball, and he's going to be able to get chunk yards. He's gonna go out there. He could win the game for you. So be careful what you wish for, Indianapolis. And And I just don't think with that Colts defense, yes, they have Darius Leonard, but to me, Darius Leonard, he's not. I mean, I'm right now. I mean, he's really good, but he's not healthy right now. So that's my whole point. Is I don't think he's healthy. So you're going to be in a situation where you're going to have to really have help from the other linebackers. They have smaller, faster linebackers. You don't have this beefy front seven. It's more built to play with speed, which I'm not sure why they built it that way when you have Derrick Henry in your division. So that's kind of weird. But I don't think they're going to be able to go with their game plan and bottle the Patriots up. It's I think they're going to be Patriots going to be able to be more physical on offense against Indy. Not to say that Indy doesn't have a good defense; they have a pretty decent defense. It's just I think the Patriots, because of their physicality and the smaller size of these linebackers, are going to be and injured Darius Leonard, they're going to be able to take advantage of that situation. That's what I see in this matchup is that their Patriots are just going to be able to out physical the Colts. Not that I don't think this is 2003 Indy where you had Peyton Manning and those indoor Colts where yes you had Edgerrin James, but come on, let's say what it is. I mean, you had Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne on those teams. I mean, those Colts teams were absolutely loaded for bear. Dallas Clark, and they were built to throw the ball around the yard. Now this Colts team is they're built on Jonathan Taylor, who's not a speed back. He's a power back with speed. So he himself is a physical back. So this team is built a little more like your outdoors type of team that's better fit for a January run. But still, I'm not going to sit here and say that this Colts team is more physical than the Patriots because I think you have two amazingly physical backs in Harrison and Ramondre Stevens. But other than that, I mean, sorry, but I think that's going to be the determining factor with those two running backs and that Patriots offensive line and the Patriots' ability to use the seams and the tight ends. So I really love what they have going this weekend. I don't think it's going to be a blow up by any means. It's going to be a hard fought game, but I think the Patriots end up squeaking this one out. And kind of on a side note here, as we kind of talked about earlier, I mean, Frank Reich, the Indianapolis head coach, tried to make this out like this was still a rivalry with the Patriots. Now, to me, I grew up, I was born in 91. So when I was 10 years old, that was when the Patriots dynasty started. Now, I obviously had watched before. I remember a little bit of the 96 Super Bowl because I was, 5 at the time. But 2001 was perfect because that's where the Patriots. That's obviously when Tom Brady got his first start, when he got his opportunity. But yeah, that was a situation where I remember from 2001 on vividly, and I was 10 years old, and then as everything started to roll into the 2003, 2004, all the way through when Manning left Indy in 2011 and went to the Broncos in 2012. I remember that whole 11-year period, 10-year period, just like it was yesterday. That was when it was truly a rivalry with Indianapolis, when it was pretty much the Brady Manning rivalry at that point. And I remembered I wanted to kick their ass every day. Every day I wanted to, every time they faced up against Indy, I wanted to kick their ass because at that point it was, yeah, Brady's better than Manning. Yeah, I know Manning has all these weapons, but the Patriots are the ones that win. Brady can still do the things that Manning does. And then obviously 2007 came when Brady had Manning's weapons and he almost had the perfect season. So, I mean, you saw some of the best matchups. You had the fourth down game, the 4th and 1, where Belichick called it, or 4th and 2, excuse me. Belichick called it to Kevin Falk. They threw it, and I still to this day think Kevin Falk got that first down. I still to this day think he did. So, I mean, these Colts matchups are vivid. And go back to the 2003 AFC Championship game against the Colts in Foxborough. You had a cold ass day. You had the Patriots just absolutely knock the crap out of the Indianapolis receivers. And it was it was awesome to watch. And that was the game that I believe uh, I mixed these two up because they were in back-to-back years. I can't remember if that was the year that Ty Law had the 4 interceptions. It might have been yeah, it was 2003 because I think Ty Law was injured for 2004. So yeah, I remember Ty Law had 3 interceptions off of Peyton Manning, and it was absolutely beautiful, beautiful. And then 2004, that's after the whole Colts and Bill Polian whined about the Patriots being too physical, and they were being that was the when a lot of the passing rules started really kind of getting ramped up there, where you can't touch a lot of these receivers. Thank you, Bill Polian. Ugh. But he came in, he I mean, the Colts came in with Manning, and then the Patriots absolutely wiped the floor with him. It was final score 20 to, I believe it was 20-3. And it was so good. And that was the quote where Teddy Bruschi came out after the game. And he's like, "You want to change the rules? You want to come in here? Change them, change the rules. We'll come in here. We'll beat your ass." So I remember that one. That was the best. I still to this day I love hearing that quote from Teddy Bruschi, that post game from Teddy Bruschi, because that was one of my favorite non Super Bowl playoff games. So I mean, they've had so many battles back and forth with Indy. It's been awesome. And so if you fast forward to what it's been, I mean, even when Andrew Luck was there, I wouldn't call it a rivalry. I mean, for Christ's sake, the 2014 team, the 2014 Patriots and Colts AFC Championship game that they played in Foxborough, that was the infamous Deflategate game. But but even after halftime, where they took away the balls, they absolutely crushed them. And after that game, the Colts hung up a AFC finalist banner. Come on. You have got to be kidding me, guys. You can't go out there and say this is a rivalry after the your one shining moment was 2006. You had one moment. You have one moment in this whole rivalry. Really? Okay, whatever, the 4th and 2 game, you can call that, but that was a regular season game. But in basically, as far as the playoffs are concerned, you have one moment in this quote unquote rivalry. And that was 2006. Other than that, you're out there hanging division or AFC finalist banners. Come on now. What a joke. You don't what a joke of a franchise. You don't go out there hanging conference finalist banners out there. You don't see the Patriots hanging up, "Oh, we went to 8 straight AFC championship games," and hanging up the 2012, 2013, 2015. Yeah, well, other than that, they went to all the rest of them because they went to the Super Bowl in 11, 14, 16, and 18, and 17. So, yeah. So, yeah, you don't see those other 4 years or 5 yeah, because they went 8 straight from 11 to 18 in those years. So, yeah, you don't see them. You, you don't see them hanging up those banners that, "Oh yeah, we were finalists in those other years." They hang up Super Bowl champion banners, and that's it, because they got 6 of them. 6 of them. They're tied with Pittsburgh for the most. So, I mean, that's it. Case done and closed. Rivalry's over. Sorry. You It was nice. It was nice when you had Peyton Manning because those games were entertaining. You actually won a playoff game and went to the Super Bowl. But those games always came down to the wire. With with Andrew Luck and the rest of the quarterback that you've had that filled in between Luck and Wentz after Andrew Luck shockingly retired a couple of years ago. It's just been, you guys have been a laugh. You guys really haven't been much of a rival since Manning left. For 10 years, it really hasn't been that great of a rivalry. So I don't know. It just made me laugh when I heard those comments come down from Frank Reich. Now we'll go through the Celtics here as Ime Udoka did come out and call out Jason Tatum here recently. Basically Ime Udoka came out and I wouldn't say blasted. That's not the right word to say for what he told Jason Tatum, but basically paraphrasing here, that that Jason Tatum has to stop treating these guys like they're his brother or his friends out there on the court. He has to go out there once the whistle is blown, and he has to go out there and compete and treat them as an enemy. They're not his friends. They're not the guys that you're going to go out and socialize with out on the court. No, you want to go and rip their guts out. Like that last part there is a little bit of dramatization, but you catch the drift. This is pretty much a situation where Ime Udoka is just basically telling Tatum that we need you to be that killer. We need you to be that Larry Bird killer instinct that out there. I'm not trying to say he's going to be a Hall of Famer, but you catch the drift. You need him to go out there and play with intensity and just hate for the other team, because you can't just go out there and after you posterize somebody, stand there and be like, I'm sorry, bro, you're my friend, blah, 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 feel bad for it, or sit there talking with them in between. It's like, no, you're out there to compete. You're out, and I'm not saying Tatum does this every single time, but still, I mean, he does it enough where your coach has to call you out for it. And honestly, that's one of the biggest criticisms I have with Tatum, because I mean, skill wise, he's awesome. He's the cornerstone of the franchise. It's just, you need to see him to get to that next level. I don't know if you can really develop it. Hopefully he shows me you can develop that killer instinct, but that's really what he needs. He needs that next level to kind of, once the game starts, because as much as Kevin Durant can drive me crazy at times, you kind of need to be that Kevin Durant of, okay, you can be friends with everybody during the off season, go work out with them, have all these things, then that's fine. But really the biggest situation there was, or the biggest thing for me is that there are just times out there where it's just like, all right, you need to kind of put your foot on their throat for the fun and just finish them off. You can't just be like, all right, I'm good with my 30 tonight, my 35, my 40 tonight. And if you sense the blood in the water and you know the team needs you and you can feel like, okay, we have a chance to snatch this victory here tonight, go out there and just do it, and maybe not worry about what all these veterans or all these young stars that you're friends with have to say about you. It's just like, damn the torpedoes, and just go for it and show me that you're ready to take the mantle over here for the Boston Celtics. So that's really what I want to see from Jason Tatum here down the stretch, because I mean, they had a bad West Coast trip. And it seems like maybe Dennis Schroeder could be at one point. I mean, he could be trouble, maybe just because he's a guy that maybe is just out for this, try to get his one max contract, because he knew he screwed up and he should have taken it from the Lakers, but he didn't. So maybe he's in this mercenary mode where this is something where even internally Jason Tatum has to kind of be that killer instinct to his own team, where it's kind of like, all right, guys, let's get in line here. Let's get ready. Let's go. Because to me, it's just been so disappointing with over these last couple of years where it's like you have some talent. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that this team is like loaded for bear to compete for an NBA championship. But no, you have Jason Tatum, who is developing into a top 10 player in right in front of our eyes. But then Jaylen Brown is a good all-star caliber player. He's a really good player. He's been hurt this year. And then after that, it's trying to fill in those pieces. And then this year, it feels like you have more depth. You have Dennis Schroeder. You have Neesmith, who's shooting well. Then you have, surprisingly, Grant Williams, who's one of the better three-point shooters on this team, which I would have been shocked telling you to that coming into this podcast. But he is. And it's just been disappointing, though, because, yes, do you have the best arsenal of talent? No. But you're still underperforming at this standpoint. And you're right now, the Boston Celtics are, give me 1 second here. They are 14-14, so they're 500. They're 500 on the season, and they have a big matchup against Golden State on Friday night, who's 23-5. So Golden State, after dealing with injuries last year, is right back on the top. Yeah, and Boston right now is, if the playoffs started today, they would be out of the playoffs. They're right behind the Hornets. So the Celtics with this, with all this, I shouldn't say with all the talent, but with the amount of talent that they have with Tatum and Brown and Marcus Smart and enough on this team where they should be like the 6th seed. They should be the 6th or 5th seed, maybe even the 4th seed. I mean, that might be pushing it a little bit here, but I mean, you still have a team where you have talent and you're not maximizing it. And to me, it's just like, it seems like every day, every week, it's the same story with Boston. It seems like every time I turn on the mic to talk for this podcast, it just seems like, okay, same situation with the Boston Celtics. They flubbed up another game. They lost another 2 in a row. They lost 3 in a row here, and they went out on the West Coast and had a bad road trip. And then, okay, yeah, we have games coming up against Golden State, Milwaukee, although they did win against Milwaukee, which was a shock. But it just seems like they're running into situations where you just keep on falling into that hole and you're not able to crawl out of it here. Yes, they're back to 500, but it just seems like every time they take a step forward, it seems like they take 2 steps back, and we're still talking about the same issues as far as with Jason Tatum, with Marcus Smart, with everybody on this team. It just seems like there's been no progress right now, and you just want to see them make progress with this Boston Celtics team and show you that, okay, there with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, there's enough to invest in here. Or if you wanted to trade Jaylen Brown to get another piece to like a Damian Lillard type of piece to pair with him. But it's just like you need to see more out of this Boston Celtics team. That's just to me, that's it right there. And then going across the locker room in the Garden to the Boston Bruins, their Garden mates. Man, they've had a tough stretch here. They lost Bergeron and Marchand to COVID, and after just getting Marchand back from a 3-game suspension, so that was short-lived as far as having him back in the lineup. So you have 2/3 of your top line missing. So right now it's just David Pastrnak, and you're just crossing fingers there that he doesn't get COVID. So it really hasn't been great for Boston, although their record's better than the Celtics. They're 14-9-2. Still not great, but not what you expected or not what you expect with having that top line. Now, again, they've run into finding other scoring throughout the rest of their team because Taylor Hall looks like he might have been. Listen, I wanted Taylor Hall back. I will be one of the first to admit that I'm wrong and that I didn't see this one coming as far as I thought. And I knew Taylor Hall's had some problems maybe not living up to his number one overall pick status, but still he's got the talent. He won an MVP in 2018, won the Hart Trophy. So it's in there. And I thought the Bruins might maybe not got the Hart Trophy winner, but you finally might have solved that second wing because you don't have to rely on Hall to be your big time scorer like he was when he was with New Jersey. So I thought maybe bringing him back would be a good thing, but he just hasn't been the same Taylor Hall this year. So without the top line missing because one was suspension with Marchand, and now he's got COVID, and now Bergeron. So now you're going to be really scrapping to get anything out of this team right now. And as things stand at this moment, the Bruins, who remember because we are back in the old lineup or the old division lineup, they're back in their old division, the Atlantic. They're right behind the Red Wings for the fourth spot in the Atlantic, and at this point, they would be the number 8 seed if they were able to get the fourth spot in the Atlantic division. So they're right on the cusp of a playoff spot. So I don't think this is in a situation where they need to blow things up and totally rebuild. I mean, obviously, unless you got some amazing trade package for Bergeron or Marchand, where it's like, I can't pass this up. But at this point, I still think this is where you have Marchand, you have Bergeron, and hockey is one of the most this isn't basketball or even football, where if you don't have the pieces, you're going to be absolutely screwed and you're going to be stuck in no man's land. Like in football, you don't have a quarterback. In basketball, you don't have 1 to 2 superstars. So in this situation, obviously Bergeron and Marchand and Pastrnak are all stars and studs, and Pastrnak and McAvoy, all those two guys are your young stud building blocks after Marchand and Bergeron go. So that's when you'll have the rebuild, when you have to find the pieces to put around them. I don't think this is a full-blown fire sale where you're going to see guys going, but I think this is where right now you still have to get as much as you can out of this core, because I don't see that front office trading away Bergeron. I don't think they should, because like I said, this is hockey. So I think this is where I'm not going to say you're going to be the St. Louis Blues like they did when the Blues beat the Bruins in 2019, but I still think there's enough with what the Bruins have where they can make a decent playoff run, or maybe get into the second round of the playoffs at this point. But if you get guys back and get them healthy and make a trade or two, I don't think they're ready to absolutely say, yes, we're going to blow this up. I don't think that's going to be it. But it will be interesting to monitor this situation as we go with just everything that's just cropped up here between COVID and lack of performance. As we mentioned, they just absolutely got the doors blown off of them against the Vegas Golden Knights 4-1, and that game was pretty much over in the first period. But it's been one hell of a start to the season for both the winter sports teams. Now, as we start about the start of one season, we'll talk about the end of one season as we're getting to the fantasy blitz. It's playoff time in most of your playoff leagues, and that should be, as we reach week 15 in the regular season in the NFL, which normally the playoffs would have started last weekend, but obviously because of the change in the schedule for the NFL, week 15 is week number 1 of the NFL of your fantasy playoffs. Now, to help you out with your fantasy playoffs in this week's Blitz short pod of the New England Weekly Sports Podcast, we will touch on your fantasy do's and don'ts for the playoffs this week. Some players, some teams to kind of stay away from or to start this week. Now, I know this one's going to seem kind of obvious with everything that's going on, but the Cleveland Browns, that is going to be your fantasy stay away for this week, because they have 18 players that have tested positive for COVID. 18 players that have tested positive. That's ridiculous. 18 players. And there are some significant ones there, like Baker Mayfield. I don't think Hunt's not going to be there because he's dealing with an injury anyways. But I think Chubb is still there at this point. Jarvis Landry is tested positive. And even if they're asymptomatic, you have to get the 2 back-to-back negative PCR tests within the 24-hour time. And that's been impossible with a lot of these guys this year. So I would just stay away from any of those Cleveland Browns players. And to be honest, maybe you go pick up the Raiders defense because this is going to be a struggle fest here for the Browns this week. Now, as far as on the positive side of things here, one guy that you probably, maybe if you're a Brandon Ayuk manager, you got frustrated, you dropped them, or you put them on the bench. Maybe you've kind of spartaned up here and started to play him. But if you've kind of forgotten about Brandon Ayuk, you have him on the bench and you've kind of been waiting for that moment. I mean, Brandon Ayuk has really started to come on strong. Now, Brandon Ayuk let's see here, over his last, let's say since week 9, so what are we in week 14? So over the last 5-6 weeks, he has put together a pretty good season since then. He had a pretty good game against Arizona where he had 6 catches, 89 yards and a touchdown, 34 yards return. Then he had a little bit of a clunker against the Rams. Only got 5. Well, depending on what format you're in, you got 5 points. But then since then, Jacksonville had a great game, 7 catches, 85 yards, a touchdown. Then the next week against Minnesota, he ended up with 3 catches, 91 yards. Didn't get a touchdown in that game, but I mean, still feasted in that game. And even this has been with the 49ers getting Deebo Samuel back, who Samuel has kind of turned into their running back kind of in this situation, sharing duties with Elijah Mitchell, who's had some concussion issues. So he's been more of a running back per se. And then he had an okay game against Seattle, 3 catches, 55 yards. And then last week he had 6 catches, 62 yards, and had that touchdown in overtime. So this is a guy that if you need that number 2, number 3 receiver, or you're looking for maybe that flex spot, this is a guy that's really picked it up, because we were looking at a guy that probably wasn't going to finish more than maybe somewhere the way he was trending early in the year, he was probably looking to be a non-factor, not even ranked, probably not even a ranked receiver, because usually most rankings you'll go like your top 200, 250, 300 players, or I don't know, so somewhere along that line. So you're not even looking at like the third, you were looking at somebody finishing well below the 40th, 45th, even 50th receiver wise. And now you're looking at a guy that's maybe obviously it's getting too late in the season for him to finish higher in those rankings, but you're probably looking at a guy that'll finish in the low to mid 30s. So you're looking at a guy, maybe not that, maybe like somewhere in that 41 to 37 range if things go really well here for him. I'd have to really look at that. But anyways, the point here is that things have picked up even with Deebo Samuel back. He's got a great matchup against Atlanta this week. So that's even been with George Kittle himself feasting. So this offense has shown that even though they're usually run heavy, that they can support 2 good pass catchers with George Kittle and Brandon Ayuk. So this is a situation where if you have Brandon Ayuk on your bench, and maybe you have maybe you had Jarvis Landry, or maybe you've had some other COVID related things happening out there, because I know the Rams have run into it now with Odell Beckham Jr. And I know that there's some other ones that are out there as well. And obviously, if you're dealing with injuries, this would be a situation where I would say definitely if you have, and honestly, if you haven't been playing them by now, I don't know what you've been doing, but to me, this is where I would say you have to play Brandon Ayuk. Now, as we finish this out, we'll go to Saquon Barkley. Now, Saquon Barkley, unless you're in a situation where you have to, he was your first round pick or he slipped later on in the draft. But if you don't have any other options at running back, then yes, you have to play Saquon Barkley. But if you have an option, if you have maybe a Damian Harris or you have, let's say, you have an Antonio Gibson, you have somebody else sitting on your bench, or maybe you have an Alexander. Well, actually, no, because Dalvin Cook is back. But if you have some other options that you could go to that are on your bench, then that's where you might want to think long and hard before you put Saquon Barkley into your lineup, just because Dallas has been so good against the run, which has been surprising. So he's just averaging 3.8 yards per carry so far this year. So he hasn't been the same explosive Saquon Barkley that we're used to. And obviously this is his first year removed from the injury, so things could be, and right now he's dealing with an ankle injury as well. So things aren't looking great. So even if he plays, he's going to be banged up, and against the Dallas team that actually has been surprisingly good against the run. So this is a situation where if you have somebody that you can stay away from, it might be a good week to say, all right, I'm going to send a sidestep Saquon Barkley here. Now, kind of like another one that I've heard some people have some struggles with here has been Alvin Kamara, because of how well the Saints, I'm sorry, how well the Tampa Bay Buccaneers play against the run. And he only had 60 some odd yards in his first week rushing on the ground. But this is where right now you don't have a lot of weapons on offense. Obviously Alvin Kamara is special, don't get me wrong, and I have him in a lot of my leagues, but this is his situation where with Alvin Kamara, he's the go-to guy. He's probably number one on the receiving depth chart right now. So he's everything to the Saints offense. So this is a situation where even if I know he only got 3 receptions in the first matchup, but I think this is where they're going to have to heavily check down to him, get this into the middle of the field. So I think maybe he might not have a huge game on the ground, but I think this is where the Bucs defense can be, with their injuries, they can be susceptible. Geez, I can't talk today. Go figure, I'm doing a podcast, of course. Susceptible to the secondary. So this is where they might try to get Kamara lined up against some of those secondary corners or secondary safeties and try to expose them that way and use his athleticism that way, or maybe get a couple of screens thrown out to him from that standpoint. But so I think this is where you don't have to be as worried. Now, is this going to be him where they saw last year in everybody's championship week, and I benefited from it last year, getting those 58 points that 50, almost 60 burger that he put up. Now, I don't think it's going to be like that, and I don't think this is going to be one of those eye rolling, oh my God, he screwed me weeks in the playoffs. But I think this is where you're going to get somewhere between a 15 to 20 point week from Kamara, where it's going to be definitely doable, where he definitely gets a good amount of points here for you. It's not going to be league winning, but it's also, he's going to keep you afloat. He's not going to be the reason that you lost. It'd be the reason that you lost would be because you started somebody's where you shouldn't have even had them on the team, where they end up, like you put somebody in your flex for, let's just say you put in Alexander Matheson because you thought, oh, well, Dalvin Cook's been dealing with injury, but you didn't pay attention to him in last week's game, or you play somebody stupid that you shouldn't. You as soon as you look at your lineup, you're like, oh man, I left him in there. That was dumb of me. Yeah, so that's where I think you could run into it. That's where unless you do that, I think you'll definitely be okay. So best of luck to you in your fantasy playoffs if you made it that far. Keep your fingers crossed. I know I'm in that situation. I am the number 3 seed in one of my leagues here, my league of records, basically. So I'm going to have it'll be a nail biting week and obviously best of luck to everybody. And that was the show this week for New England Sports Weekly. We'll be back next week with a breakdown of the Patriots and Colts game, as well as looking forward to Bills Patriots Part 2, this time in Foxborough. And of course, we will keep you up to date on any news with the Boston Bruins if things are getting better or getting worse as far as COVID's concerned, and obviously keep you up to date on the Boston Celtics as well. And as always, remember to like and subscribe to the show on YouTube at New England Sports Weekly. Find the channel there. Hit the like and subscribe button on that. Hit that bell. And then also find us on Spotify, SoundCloud as well. Like and subscribe there. Definitely subscribe on those platforms and listen to us on the go anytime, anywhere, and keep yourself up to date on the New England sports scene. We'll get you covered there. And then as always, you can follow me at Sean_Met28 on Instagram or on Twitter, and follow the show on Twitter at NE Sports Weekly. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you have a good week, and we'll be back next week for our Christmas week show. So we'll try to make that a little Christmas themed as well. But until then, have a good one, everybody.